Ladies and gentlemen, it's story time on a Friday night. Tell us a story, boys.
Good evening, everybody. Gonna get started with the show in just 2 more minutes. While you're waiting, always love to see where you're watching from. So post in the comments, let me know where you're from. Hello, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. I've got a great interview tonight. We're going to get started in just a second. But post in the comments before we start with the interview. Let me know where you're from, where you're watching from tonight.
Put your hands together one more time for the men's traditional, group number 2.
Hello, everybody. Paul Gatter here with PowWows.com. Thanks for being here again. This is Powwow Nation Live. This is the weekly show from PowWows.com. PowWows.com is your place to come learn, explore, connect, and experience Native American culture. I really hope that we are your jumping off point to understand more about Native culture. Whether you're full-blood Native and grew up on the reservation, whether you're an ally, or someone just discovering their ancestry, wherever you are, I hope we are that place where you can come, learn, and explore Native culture. So tonight's show, I've got a really great interview with Mariah Gladstone. She is the founder of Indigikitchen, and she is really challenging some of the ways we think about food and changing our diets. It's a great interview. I'm really excited for you to see that in just a minute. Couple of announcements. First, stay tuned for the end of tonight's episode. I've got a really special sneak peek and a special announcement it's a little, you're just going to have to wait and see. It's going to be, but if you stick around to the end, I promise it'll be worth it. 2, still time to get in on our current giveaway, www.powwows.com/win. You can still get in to win the Teton Trade Cloth Honor Blanket. That ends tonight, so get your entries in for that. After you finish watching the video, go check that out. All right, couple other announcements. Did you enjoy the video at the beginning? If you did, that was from Gathering of Nations Powwow, which is held in Albuquerque. And after 2 years, it's going to be back in person. I'm heading back to Albuquerque April 28th through the 30th. So excited to bring you that again. We're going to be streaming it live throughout the weekend. We'll have 2 live streams going like we did in the past. One will be Stage 49, which is a full music festival with special performances, musical guests, comedians, special dance performances, all kinds of stuff out there on the Stage 49 area. And then our second stream will be the Powwow, everything happening inside Tingley Coliseum, which will be the grand entries, the dance contest, the specials. They've got a hand drum special. They've got a Southern Buckskin team dance competition, the crowning of Miss Indian World, and so much more inside the arena. So stay tuned for that. If you want to know more about that, PowWows.com/2022GON. That'll get you all the information you need. Whether you're heading to Albuquerque or you just want to watch it on PowWows.com, we've got all the information right there. Other announcements. We do have some new merch that has hit the stores. One, we got these new stickers. Stewardess. That one is now, as of today, out on the site, so go check that out. I love the way that one turned out. We've got t-shirts of that as well. And also, starting tomorrow, we've got our Native Strong line, which features about 30 different tribes listed there with the words Native Strong on top. All of this will be 10% off for the next 7 days starting tomorrow morning. So you can go check that out over on our shop. PowWows.com/shop. Head on over there to get in on our merch. Really appreciate that. All right, I see a couple of questions. Yeah. Melissa wants to know any powwows coming up in Southern Cal. So the powwow calendar is blowing up. Man, we are getting so many flyers and information sent to us. And if you are helping organize a powwow, please get us your information as soon as possible. But there are tons of powwows happening. The best way to do that is to head on over to our calendar, PowWows.com/powwows near me. That'll get you right there and get you all the information. But Maria, to answer your question, so you can head over to the shortcut, PowWows.com/California. That takes you right to a special page just about California. We have that for every state. You can also just Google powwows in California. It'll take you right to us. So again, now keep in mind, all the events have not sent us their information yet. So we are still adding things. We're still waiting on people to send us in their events. But here's what we have so far. We've got one happening in October, one coming up in June. UC San Diego, that's a good one coming up in May, just in a couple of weeks here. There's another one in May. Another one in May. Yeah, so there's a lot going on in Southern California. UCLA is having a powwow. That's just a few weeks away. So get the idea. There's lots going on. Go check out the powwow calendar. I know you'll find one close to you. And yeah, keep checking back often because there are going to be more and more getting added. All right, I do want to say a special thanks to our sponsor tonight, and here is a word from them.
Do you know I love you so, and mommy will never let you go. To the stars and the sky, you'll always be mommy's little guy. Hey oh, hey oh, hey oh.
So for more information, head on over to PowWows.com/vaccine and find out if you can get a vaccine, if you're eligible, or maybe it's time for you to get the booster. But let's keep the numbers down low. Let's make sure that powwows remain open throughout 2022. I'm excited to be heading back, so let's keep it that way, all right? Travis, October is his birthday. Well, happy birthday. Early birthday, Travis. Hope you make it to a powwow for your birthday. Okay, just a couple more announcements before we get into our interview for tonight. And I want to say a special thank you to our patrons. Those are the folks over at Powwow Nation this is the booster club of PowWows.com is what I like to call them. Maybe just because I'm involved in high school stuff and we have a booster club for the band. So that's where the term I kind of came up with. But over at PowwowNation.com, these folks have joined our special community over there. And we're doing some cool things. We've got some special gifts coming to them starting next month. I'm going to change some ways some things happen for them. But you can get special rewards for joining our Patreon. And we just did our first live Zoom where we brought in patrons only. And we had a little Zoom chat. That was fun a few days ago. And we'll be doing more of those. But for as little as $2 a month, you can join the Patreon and really help support PowWows.com. It does help us move things forward, helps us continue to hire writers, stream more powwows, and get all this kind of content out to you. So thank you so much for that support. PowwowNation.com is where you can go and join that community. All right. Let me tell you a little bit about Maria. Maria Gladstone, I love this interview with her. She's super, super interesting the way she is thinking about food and changing things. But she grew up in Northwest Montana, easy for me to say, right? She's Blackfoot and Cherokee. She graduated from Columbia University with a degree in environmental engineering, and then she returned home and she developed this concept of Indigikitchen. I'll let her tell you more about that, but she's done lots of public speaking, hosted a TEDx talk, and has been on a lot of social media really talking about how to put indigenous foods back into your diet and use them in recipes. So I hope you enjoyed this interview with Mariah Gladstone. So I watched one of your talks today, and I love the fact that you were talking about the decolonization, and that's a big topic right now. There's a lot of people talking about how decolonization. That's the word I was looking for, I think. But nobody is talking about how it relates to food. So when you start talking about that, what is the reaction? What are you hearing back from the audiences that you're speaking to about this kind of topic?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are really interested in this idea of a return to indigenous foodways and a revitalization of our ability to feed ourselves. So instead of decolonization, I'll actually talk about the re-indigenization of our diets, because we're recognizing that we can use these tools that our ancestors have, but we can use them to move forward into the future rather than going back and trying to undo colonization. That's something people are super interested in.
Yeah. I like the idea of wrapping it more in a positive light than the negative. That's great. All right. Well, let's back up. So how did you get started in food? I guess tell me a little bit about your background and, how you got started into cooking and this type of thing.
I was really lucky that my mom had me cooking a lot in the kitchen growing up, and it was her secret way of teaching me fractions. And of course, then I understood the basic concepts of what went into food, and she let me experiment even as a little kid. So I have recipes written down in marker with no sense or reason behind the spellings of words. But I was able to experiment and put things together. And even though my undergraduate degree is not at all involved in food, I, of course, had to cook. I had to feed myself to get through college. And I began to experiment a lot more with food, as well as using it just as a stress reliever, baking for friends and being able to share that experience and share meals. And then, of course, when I returned back to my home community after my undergraduate degree, I was able to get a lot more access to the traditional foods here in Montana, but also recognize that disconnect that we have from access to foods as well. This idea of, like, quote, food desert, but also, the need to restore knowledge around traditional foods and how to use them and how to harvest them and how to cook them.
Yeah. Listening to that talk, and you mentioned that where you are, there's only 2 grocery stores that sell fresh fruit. That's crazy in such a vast area. But it is, even here, I live in a fairly metropolitan area, even though I'm out in the suburbs, but it's still easier to drive by Chick-fil-A at night than to stop and cook the meal with real food, as you're talking about. So, I guess the challenge of time and ease, so what are the shortcuts to really help people get into this kind of habit?
Yeah, I think that obviously, out here, it's probably a town pump deli filled with JoJo's and chicken strips and stuff like that. And that's the easy meal that people can go to. But people ultimately want to be eating healthy foods. They want to feed their kids healthy foods. That goes without saying, but right. Often that can be a challenge, especially when people are exhausted at the end of a long work day, and just preparing a meal in the kitchen can be tiring in itself, especially when everyone's hungry and just wants to eat. So I try putting out recipes that are very achievable for folks to do. I'll use, of course, the tools of the modern kitchen, whether that's putting things in a slow cooker at the beginning of the day, so you have food ready at the end of the day, whether that's an Instapot or a pressure cooker and rapid cooking something, whether it's, just being able to get kids involved in the kitchen. If you have a kid that can grind up zucchini noodles and can turn a squash into essentially a spaghetti hack,
Mhm.
then you're getting kids involved too. And that gives them ownership over the meal as well. And, I'm of course looking at things that people recognize as foods, they enjoy as delicious. I'm not looking for 5-star dining. I'm just trying to make things that people will be able to do when they get home from work at the end of the day.
That's awesome. So, and I've talked to a lot of people lately, of course, and with their businesses and all the challenges over the last couple of years, it hurt a lot of businesses. But I'm imagining with the pandemic and people really wanting to do more at home, you hear the stories of like Home Depot had massive sales because everybody was doing home projects. During COVID, did you find more people turning to cooking and trying to find better ways to prepare their food?
For sure. There were a lot of issues, especially at the start of the pandemic, that really identified some key problems in the supply chain and how susceptible Indigenous communities were to breakdowns within that transportation system. And so we, of course, like many places, ran into shortages and escalated prices and things of that sort. But the intensity of those problems forced people into looking for alternatives. And so now I can say that we can go to one of the grocery stores on the reservation and we can buy Blackfeet raised bison from our tribal herd and have access to that resource. And it's $7.99 a pound, which is cheaper than you can buy bison at Costco 2
Right.
hours away in the big city. And so, that's something that our nation started looking at, and we're like, how do we deal with this? How do we manage the concentration in the meat packing industry and challenge that system and give the quality meat to our people that we're raising here? So that, there were things like that were really, the problems, because they became so extreme, forced us to find solutions. Similarly, I serve on the board of FAST Blackfeet, which stands for Food Access and Sustainability Team. And we run one of the food pantries in Browning. But part of that work, besides food pantry work, an emergency food supply system, has been building gardens and starting people growing. Right, last year it was native plants for teas so that people had access to healthy beverages. And this next year it's vegetables, and then being able to sell the vegetables to the food pantry so that they can distribute them to folks, so that they can start farmers markets and we can have fresh vegetables that are grown in this community. So there's things like that, and being able to really offer those resources and change the way in which we're getting food and we're supplying food to our nation.
That's awesome to hear that your nation has taken that stand. The concept of you're not sovereign until you can feed your own people. That's a pretty challenging concept when most tribes are still struggling with financial sovereignty, or even just government sovereign, being able to govern themselves. But you're right. We have to start looking at those things. And I don't think the food is going to get any easier. You hear with climate change and other things that our food supply is going to be a challenge here soon. So you have to become self-reliant. I love hearing that. As you travel, and I know you do some other talks, how are other nations? Do you know if other nations are starting to move toward this?
I think almost every Indigenous nation on Turtle Island has interest in food sovereignty. I think it, of course, requires some long-term planning, and so many of our communities have been focused on immediate survival. And so, sometimes to do that long-term work that is needed, we have to be in a place where we're ready to do that. And so not every nation has started to, put in long-term food sovereignty plans or thought about their own gardens or what that takes. But everyone's interested in it. And so I think that's part of the reason that Indigikitchen resonates for so many communities. But also, I think when we look at the history of food systems on North America, we know that food systems were very intentionally targeted by colonial governments so that Native people would not be able to push back against colonization and land theft. And I mean, there were laws passed in Congress which said that if you didn't send your children to boarding school, your rations would be withheld. So, I mean, everything is connected to food systems, and that idea of food sovereignty is essential to our political sovereignty too. And so as we recover that, we also recover this ability to push back against colonization. If we're not relying on subsidized food programs to feed our communities, we're able to be a lot more active in this broader space. That said, there are a lot of amazing food sovereignty programs that are light years ahead of where even we are here on Blackfeet Nation. I know the Oneida Nation of Wisconsin, Menominees, I was like, Wisconsin, Great Lakes tribes are doing some amazing things. Red Lake Nation, I've seen some amazing stuff happen from some West Coast tribes. These folks that are doing work to build food systems that are ran by the tribe, or they're supporting tribally owned businesses. And, they're creating amazing systems. I think it's Menominee that has an aquaponics system. So they're raising fish in a greenhouse, and then that's feeding plants in the greenhouse as well. I know that Red Lake they have, of course, wild rice, and they have their fisheries, and they have wild harvested berry sauces and value-added products made with their wild plums and choke cherries and all of these amazing foods. So you can go order pancake syrup made with their wild blueberries and whatnot. And so there are really cool things like that happening. But there's also Indigenous producers, like I know of several folks that are fishers and run, I was gonna say fishermen and women that run their own businesses that are Native. So it's not tribally owned, it's owned by individuals, but they're being bought by their tribes, or they're supported by the Intertribal Agricultural Council and their American Indian Foods program. So there's a lot of work being done, and folks are excited about it. Across Indian country, we have the ability to support each other's food enterprises. There's a wonderful woman that runs Sakari Farms out in Oregon, and she makes like cedar smoked salt and hot sauces. And so I'm like, yes, Native owned hot sauce company. And I'm able to support that stuff and, support that value added product. But she's also growing all of those foods, and, peppers, chilies are of course an indigenous food from Mexico. And so we're looking at these ancestral foods and these connections and the ways in which they can inspire us and power us forward today.
That's great. A friend of mine sent me a basket of stuff from Red Lake, and so it had some of their jams. It had this really great hot seasoning salt, and some wild rice, and that stuff was fantastic. And they're doing some really great stuff up there. Well, tell me about how did the idea come about for your website, Indigikitchen? How did that sprout up?
Yeah, I was actually at a food sovereignty conference. Again, whole bunch of natives talking about food sovereignty. And a lot of the talk at that time, this was in 2016, I think, was about revitalizing and we're restoring our access to foods, this idea of food desert and the idea that we don't have enough grocery stores. And that, of course, is an issue, but also, it comes with this multi-generational history of our food systems being taken away from us and being forced into relying on government subsidized food systems, so that we forget all of our traditional knowledge. That's taken from us. It just didn't just disappear. It's stuff that was really intentionally disconnected so that we wouldn't be able to feed ourselves. And so as we look at restoring access, we also have to connect that with a restoration of knowledge. We have to know how to cook our wild plants. We have to know how to butcher wild game. We have to know, how do we plant our seeds so that we're not depleting the soil? How do we harvest things and save them so that we can eat them into the winter? So all of that knowledge has to come with the access work. We know people are excited about foods, but they need to know what to do with them. And a lot of recipe books can be really French-based in terminology. They can be hard to access for folks that didn't necessarily grow up reading cookbooks. And so I came up with the idea for an Indigenous digital kitchen, Indigikitchen, and started making videos using the janky camera equipment and the camera skills I was able to learn off of YouTube. And I started making my own YouTube videos.
And so now, and now you've got a plethora of recipes and videos out there. So you're right about the recipe books. I had not thought about that, but they are written from a certain perspective. And I find it, if I ever try to do that, fortunately I have a wife that cooks much better than I do, but you read even simple instructions, it is confusing. So how are you overcoming that on your website and really making it accessible to anybody?
Yeah, I work hard to, of course, use layman's terms whenever possible, but also I couple everything with videos so that people can not only have instructions written down, but also be able to see what that means. If I'm describing cutting up a butternut squash so that it's in lasagna noodle shape, it really helps to have a video that goes with that helps you go, oh yeah, I can do that, which makes it that much more achievable. And yes, cookbooks can be super unfriendly if you don't know the terminology. And when I was growing up, we obviously didn't have smartphones in our pockets, so we weren't able to Google every word very easily. And so I remember a neighbor calling me and freaking out because she was trying to prepare rice-a-roni and she didn't know if she had a saucepan. This was in like 7th grade. And I'm like, it's just a pot. But we don't use the term saucepan in rural Montana for just describing our basic pots. And so I had to rescue her on that. But it's so funny because it's this information that can be just out of people's reach. And it is what I'm doing to try to make it much more accessible so that folks realize how easy it can be.
And you're right, we don't call them that here in the South either. They're just pots. Get the big one or get the small one is about it. Well, exactly. All right, so when somebody new, hopefully there's people watching now that are learning about your website for the first time. So a new visitor coming, how do they get started? What's the best way to really get into your cooking and this whole style of thinking?
Yeah, I of course look at the things that I have access to, and whether that's fresh harvested greens from outside the door. And for me in Montana, that's going to be different than folks in the South, for example. But I do have access to wild game meat. I'm really lucky here. So I have deer and elk, and now I can buy bison in the grocery store, which is awesome. But it's finding ways to use those things. And a lot of the times what I will do is I will make recipes that people are familiar with. So of course we know Indians love spaghetti, right? And so we can obviously substitute everything in spaghetti for indigenous ingredients, right? Tomatoes are indigenous. Like this whole idea of red sauce was taken from native people to begin with. So we're just reclaiming it. As for pasta, there are so many indigenous substitutions for pasta, right? I already mentioned zucchini noodles, which is just essentially cutting up a zucchini like noodles. And there's special tools called spiralizers that will do it quickly, but you could take a vegetable peeler and just peel the zucchini into little noodles like that. You could add carrot noodles if you wanted to. And then you just cook them up in a pan for 5 minutes, and then you have delicious spaghetti noodles that are sweet, but also a vegetable. So you don't have to feel guilty about it. And then you can put bison, if that's what you have. You could put venison burger if that's what you have. You can make it vegetarian. You can use bell peppers, which are of course more indigenous foods. And you can of course indigenize your seasonings if you want to. There's tons of different indigenous seasonings, everything from cedar to wild bergamot, which has like almost an oregano flavor. There's of course peppermint, if you want to season things with peppermint. There's yarrow, which tastes like tarragon. I'm just trying to compare things to colonial versions of these things, which I don't need to do that. Not everything needs to be framed in terms of colonial foods. But it's definitely, and then of course you can look up ancestral recipes. What have people been making for thousands of years? So, I look in the Great Lakes and wild rice with berries and maple syrup and a nice sweet dish, and, be able to utilize a recipe that's been made like that for thousands of years and powered people and fed people and kept nations alive. So, there are different ways of looking at food, and there are, cookies that we can make with sunflower seeds and maple syrup, and, be able to connect with all of these delicious foods and take that ancestral wisdom, the agricultural knowledge, and then reimagine it in our own way. Culture is not stagnant. We're able to change and learn and restore that knowledge and recognize the wisdom of the past while using it today in the present and guiding us into the future.
That's great. It seems when you first hear the topic of trying to re-indigenize your cooking, it seems like an overwhelming topic, but you do present it in such a way that it seems a little more accessible. All right, so you've got a great website. Your YouTube videos are awesome. You've moved past the janky camera. You're doing great stuff there. So what's next now? Hopefully things are opening up. I'm hoping you're going to get back out there speaking some more. What is coming for you in this year?
Yeah, I'm super excited. I'm heading to the East Coast in April, doing a couple of university presentations and food demonstrations. So I'm really excited about that. I'm working with Fast Blackfeet and the Food Pantry to teach some cooking and gardening classes. So I'm really excited about that. Not only how do we get things to grow in cold Montana climates, but also how do we take all of these zucchinis that we're getting out of our garden and turn them into 8 different types of food. So lots of fun things like that. I'm excited to be working on a children's cookbook about native foods, which I think is extra important for kids to learn how to cook, since I was lucky enough to learn when I was really young. Working on a couple different toolkits and research projects about the logistics of our food supply system and really tedious information about trucking and transportation, but ultimately to connect with better served grocery stores in our communities and lower food prices, hopefully. So doing a lot of really fun things. And then of course, just getting to experiment in the kitchen. So seeing if I can make macarons with pumpkin seeds instead of almonds, and maple sugar instead of White Death, right? So looking at fun things like that, but just trying to connect with that knowledge and get to cater a fundraiser for our local gardening program. Lots of really exciting stuff on the horizon for sure.
Well, I definitely can send you my address if you need taste testers for any of that. It all sounds great. And the idea of a cookbook, if you can get it, a kid's cookbook, if you can get kids to cooking and thinking of food this way, it's a lot easier. They don't have to rethink like the whole idea of going back to natural food and real food instead of processed stuff. You can give them early on. I love the idea of that. So please keep us updated on that too. I'd love to know more about that when it comes out. That's great.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, thanks for spending a few minutes with us. I love what you're doing over there at Indige Kitchen. It's a great concept, and I love all your videos. So thanks for spending a few minutes with us.
And thank you so much. It's easy to revitalize our food systems. It's easy to find indigenous foods. 3/5 of the world's food originated in the Americas. it's not hard to find native foods. So it's time that Native people learn how to cook with them again.
Thank you. So I hope you enjoyed that interview. Who's ready to have her cook for us? You know, I'm, you know, if she opens a restaurant, I'm there. And I was serious about the whole taste testing thing. Who's with me on that one? So thanks for all the comments coming in. So please make sure you go check out her website and you know, get on her list so you can get updates from her. I really appreciate Maria spending a few minutes with us. Great topic. Okay, for those that stayed around, I promised you something special. So tonight at midnight, April 1st, and this is not an April Fool's joke, Pendleton is sponsoring a new contest here on PowWows.com that starts tomorrow on April 1st. David says, I'm with you. Yeah, I'm ready, man. Let's get her to cater an event or something. We're going to give away 5 Pendleton blankets thanks to our friends over at Pendleton. Here is one that they sent me. This one is called Earth. It is from the American Indian College Fund line of blankets they have. This is just one of the 5 we're giving away. It starts tomorrow, PowWows.com/win. And here's the kicker. For those that stayed around, not that button, this button, we're going to have bonus codes again this month for this contest. 5 Pendleton blankets are up for grabs, 5 different winners. And I'm giving you a bonus code tonight so that you all can get a jump start when the contest opens tomorrow on April 1st. Head on over to PowWows.com/win and enter the bonus code 13482. That's only available for you guys watching this video tonight. 13482. We won't use that again anywhere else. Just for you guys. So if you stayed around to the end, there is your special surprise. You can get lots of ways to enter when the contest opens tomorrow. There's lots of different options there. Things to do daily, so come back every day to get all your entries in there. Noah, I see that. Hello. Thanks for being here. Melissa says I'll pay her to let me taste test. Yeah, I'm all for it. Let's have her do a tasting menu or something. And I saw a comment, more native foods at Powwows. Amen. I'm all for that. I've been to some with some amazing. I think Hunting Moon one year had a 4 or 5 different food vendors that were cooking some amazing stuff. Some of that wild rice she was talking about, and some really good dishes, not just your typical fry bread and that kind of stuff. It was some really good traditional dishes. Awesome. But thanks again for Maria. Don't forget to go join the contest tomorrow. Don't forget about our stream coming up in a few weeks for Gathering Nations. And so we do the show live every Thursday night. My name is Paul Gowder. I am the founder of PowWows.com. Next week, I do have a video, and it is scheduled. You'll be able to watch a video, but unfortunately, I won't be live. I will be in Dayton, Ohio next week. My daughter is competing in Winter Guard International's World Championships. Their team is really good, and we're going to go to the World Championships. So wish her luck. But that's where I'll be next week. But I do have a video ready, and it will go out at the same time, just like we're live. It's just I won't be able to interact and talk to you, so sorry about that. But I will be back live soon. But anyways, I hope you have a wonderful week. Get your entries in on the new contest tonight or in the morning whenever it opens up on April 1st. Hope you have a great night, everyone, and a wonderful weekend, and I will see you soon. Good night.